Yes, good morning. We want to thank Dr. Jerry Pollack and his team for this wonderful international conference. As you just heard, we're going to speak about oxyhydrogen and examination of Browns gas, this elusive theme. We've been investigating hydrogen energy for over a quarter of a century, beginning with the International Association of Hydrogen Energy, the University of Miami. And now hydrogen energy and HHO energy, or Browns gas, has become involved with various topics ranging from transportation of cars, planes, to now in actual drone systems. Also hydrogen for space travel, hydrogen energy as applied to the workplace and in the home. For example, in Japan and Korea, which have programs in residential fuel cell micro combinations of heat and power. Larger fuel cells are moving into the commercial heater market in the United States. For example, the Fuel Cell Energy Company as an example. We're also looking at hydrogen fuel cells that are being tested for use as batteries for cell phones. In Korea, carbon cleaning systems for cars, and also health possibilities. Today's fuel cell technology is not green. I want to emphasize that. Most car companies have been releasing fuel cell vehicles in various parts of the world. Most of these vehicles run on fuel or pressurized H2 manufactured at large industrial plants that produce hydrogen by combining hot steam and natural gas, an energy-intensive process that releases carbon dioxide as a byproduct.
So even if we're just talking about hydrogen like fuel cells, Hyundai now wants 10,000 fuel cells on cars on the road by 2020, and the problems are as follows. Hydrogen infrastructure is not there, and then there's a competition with battery technologies such as from Elon Musk and Tesla. Although Stanford University came out with something recently that everyone should be aware of, and that they're now working with a nickel iron oxide with a single catalyst water splitter. So this really changes the whole mode of the very expensive platinum electrodes and everything like that. And the single catalyst water splitter also goes back a little bit more to what we're talking about with Browns gas. There's also the benefits of hydrogen, which is the range of travel, and that it has zero gas emissions once it's in the car.
So what is Browns gas? This is the important question. It is defined as a total mixture of gases that have evolved through electrolyzing water using electrolyzers specifically designed to only slightly separate or not separate the resulting gases. The Browns gas mixture consists of diatomic hydrogen, diatomic oxygen, and water vapor, also called oxyhydrogen or HHO gas. In reality, the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen seems to be 2-to-1, but sometimes there is more hydrogen, and it is also called hydroxy gas.
So from being here over the last few days, which we've really enjoyed, we have to really look at what it is. And to be honest, nobody has come up with one conclusion of what Browns gas is. Everyone has their own opinions, but the conclusion is not there. So obviously, diatonic is there. It's present in the system. It's been analyzed. Monatomic is also probably there, not as stable. So really 1 to 3% of the entire gas may be monatomic. Then there's other possibilities, and all these things kind of fit together. We'll show you a graph in a minute. H3O, where you have hydronium ion, this seems to be also present. And there's a possibility that when you separate the water, what you have is that the oxygen takes some of the electrons from the hydrogen. So you could have H plus and O minus. Now there's a lot of things also with the valencies, as I just mentioned. H2O altogether could have different valencies. For example, if you're adding an electrolysis process, you could actually gain a couple of electrons either for the oxygen so that you start having a 180-degree valence system instead of the 104.5, which is kind of normal, and either that or the two that are in the first shell of the electron could actually come up. So you end up with kind of 3 open instead of 2 open valencies, and then you get the 180-degree across. So this is just one possibility. It's also considered a trigonal pyramidal formation. Also, we're going to be looking at Chris Ekman, who's done a lot of work, and he claims it's a plasma orbital expansion theory. That's part of his work. Now, he worked at Idaho State University, but he was really a student. But they allowed him to do this interesting graph, and you can see the peaks. But let's start from the very beginning. So this is really how the mass and the atomic, the amount of atomic molecules in the gas itself. So you start with some of the lowest being monatomic hydrogen. Then you get the higher peak, which is diatomic hydrogen. And then you have some carbon and helium. Some of these things are just byproducts. Then you have the next closest to the large peak, if you can't see it, is monatomic oxygen. So it's a combination. Then the higher peaks of water vapor, because that is present in the system. And then you have what he considers 5% of the gas is the plasma expanded water. And if you go on to some of it, you'll see the next larger peak down the road is a diatomic oxygen. So it's a combination. That's why it's so difficult to see what's really going on. Certain tests also show that there's a high electron density in the gas equal to or higher than water. Infrared radiation has also been recorded connected with pi binding. And you have a lot of things going on, really, with the positive, negative ions, and even protons maybe playing a critical role. Some people have equated it on the internet to easy water, but of course we're talking about a state now from liquid to gas. But it's interesting to see some correlations, and it's also interesting to see that maybe there's as Dr. Hurtak and I will say, not a fourth state of water, we already know what that is with easy water, but maybe even a fifth state going in the other direction.
Yes, the researcher George Weissman calls it electrically expanded water, and according to his research entitled Eagle Research, in Browns gas, quote, water is absorbing electricity and expanding into a gaseous state. This gaseous form of water is combustible, it implodes, and is stable, remains in a gaseous state with changes in temperature, unlike steam, end of quote.
Actually, in some cases, it seems that it may only last somewhere between 11 to 15 minutes, but that's okay because it's usually made on board the system. So how do you create the system?
Browns gas can be generated on demand, usually from distilled water. The construction contains one electrolyte solution in the reservoir, KOH, or potassium hydroxide, lie along with water, approximately 1 teaspoon of KOH for every 2 liters of water, /1/2 gallon, which allows for electric current conduction. There's also a generator dry cell made up of stainless steel plates that are vibrating plus minus with neutral charges. And one has also a primary bubbler, which sometimes is added as a flash arrestor.
Now all this is hooked up to some energy source, which if it's in your car would be your battery. And then there's some of the sophisticated systems has a pulse width modulator for optimizing and controlling the amount of hydrogen and oxygen generated. So here's a picture of it. You can see at the far corner what the components are.
Stainless plates, 20 gauge to 3/16 of an inch. They vary in size from 4 inches to 6 inches or 5 inches, sometimes square 5x5 or 6-inch plate. Sometimes just scrap metal is used with 2 to 12 holes around the sides.
And then on the other corner, you see the actual dry cell put together. Now, the number of plates is some of the key to all of this, and it can vary. The minimum number, for the most part, is 5 plates. And that means 3 are neutral, and the other 2 are positive and negative charges. So you actually hook up your electricity 1 positive, 1 negative terminals. So if you expand it to 11 plates, 8 are neutral, 2 are positive, 1 are negative, or you reverse that, 2 are negative, 1 are positive. Doesn't seem to make that much difference, and the neutral ones are usually in between. So you can get up to 200 plates. But in actuality, many people are taking something like 25 or 40 plates, and then you double those. Like in other words, instead of having 1 dry cell, you end up having 2 dry cells or 4 dry cells. This is all some of the research that we've been involved with. So water and cell temperature are just over 100 degrees. You have 17 to 18 amp, which produces 1 liter a minute at 12 volts or 204 watts. For a car or trunk, that's where you need the multiple. You need 3 to 5 plus liters a minute. And the outer body of the material is usually some sort of plastic. In some cases PVC, but I heard today maybe that's not a great thing.
So we take a look at the diagram. The neutral plates are made of stainless steel too, but have no wire connections and are used to reduce amperage, which doesn't have to be more than about 2.2 amps. Bolts that hold the plates together are coated so as not to touch metal to metal on the plates.
So you see the diagram here, which gives you a real idea of what it is. You have, you don't have the separator that was originally there in even Faraday's work. You actually bring it all together. It's called a dry cell because the entire thing is not of water. You only have water in the lower part. And that's part of what works, because the idea is you have, you generate it, and then the gas, which is lighter, goes to the top and then exits. And that's basically the system of how it works. There's different holes in the bottom. The lower part of the plates actually have staggered holes to help move, maybe in a type of vortex, the gas to go through. And then the exit holes are really singular. And then you have the holes for the plus and minus attachments of the electricity. So here's Yul Brown, who was born in Bulgaria, which is one of the reasons I think we're really all here talking about this.
That is to say, his great invention, U.S. patent 4014777 in 1977.
And if you want to just sum up what's the active area of the plates, if it's a 6-inch round plate or square plate, you have to subtract the area of the gaskets, which are between the plates, and so you end up with about a 34.57-inch square active area. And it's calculated to be about 15 kJ in each liter created.
So there's also the importance of the bubbler, that is to say where the HHO comes in and goes out. Water is placed inside the bubbler. On the bubbler should be a quote-unquote blowout or non-return check valve, usually with saran wrap or plastic bag. The purpose of the bubbler is to trap foam. The foam is made up of tiny bubbles of gas surrounded by a thin membrane of water. It's electrolyte content. The electrolytes are mostly caustic. They are capable of dissolving aluminum. So the bubbler is used to give foam a space to dissipate, and in some cases collect the electrolyte and water before they get into the engine itself. Additionally, there should be a quote-unquote flashback arrestor as a separate unit.
So here's a system, and by the way, this is also manufactured in Bulgaria, we found out when we did more research, also in England and other places. It's available also on the internet, and people are making this stuff from $200 to about $2,000, so you can buy it right off, and it's very clear. You have the dry cell, you have the reservoir on the far side, you have the bubbler over here, you have the KOH, which is needed, and then you have all the tubing and the electrical components. Very, very simple, and let's see really a little bit more about this.
So for startups, it's easily available. Well, what's the history of Browns gas? In the 60s, William Rhodes was the first successful inventor to patent an electrolyzer that produced the simple single-duct gas we now call Browns gas. In the 70s, Yul Brown himself, Ila Velbov from Bulgaria, filed a patent on his design of Browns gas electrolyzer and spent the rest of his life in the United States and Australia trying to make his gas, a commercial success. He spent millions of dollars in nearly 30 years in this endeavor.
Now we have a very good friend, Adam Tromley, who knew
and work with Yul Brown himself. Yeah. So these are very important dialogues from various inventors we've talked to. As some of you know, I work with Walter Schallbergers and also Tromley, who is from Colorado, working with the Absent group of boy geniuses, had the opportunity to work for several years with himself.
So we're going to play this little clip of Adam talking about his life with Yul, because let's face it, we're here in Bulgaria. This is one of the geniuses of Bulgaria that's now known. He moved to Australia first and then to the United States, but he's known throughout the world. Begin. Is it loud enough? It's not like that. No, they have to do it in the back.
Gas burning perfectly, so there's no wasted heat, and there's only water byproduct.
As a young physicist and inventor, I can imagine how wonderful it was working with him.
Oh, it was so much fun. You and I had a lot of fun. We worked together a lot. I mean, night and day. And we designed all kinds of systems. We designed big hydroxy implosion turbine designs where we could generate like megawatts of power. And at least in the design. And we were just using the characteristics of the implosion of the gas, which we could physically demonstrate any time. So it wasn't like a stretch. It was no longer theoretical. There was no buddy. There was no internet saying, that can't happen because that's just nonsense. There was this famous guy, one guy in Colorado in particular, who kept saying, it's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible. And these guys would come in and they would, people from Aspen, we would fly them in on our helicopter, and they would come in and they would just go, that's going to change the whole world. And because they could see it, nobody could deny it. And I would, if they asked me to do the demonstration 5 times, I'd do the demonstration 5 times.
Of all of his great insights that he shared with you, what stands out in your mind that was so striking? I mean, here's a person who went through World War II, was in the Russian Gulag. I have this romantic picture of him swimming across the Black Sea, of course. But I mean, why not?
He swam across a river from Bulgaria to Turkey when he was in prison.
Winding up on your porch and then opening really the knowledge of the 21st century.
Yeah, one of the things I have to say about Ewell is he was the epitome of a survivor.
So let's talk about Browns Gas, because we think of Ewell Brown, really the father, quote unquote, of Browns Gas, which has revolutionized so much. And this man, in spite of all of the difficulties, struggles, and challenges, was in some respects a carrier of higher scientific truths. So,
well, he certainly had, I mean, he told me one night, we ended up drinking a lot of vodka together, and he told me one night, he said, he says, I'm on a mission. And I said, yes, I got that. And he says, and it directs my life. And me meeting you and me working together, and he just went on about this idea that he was there to introduce this to the combustion world, to the world that was being consumed. And the truth of the matter is that he really did a very good job scientifically, proudly representing Bulgaria in a certain very real sense. He was very proud of being Bulgarian.
So Adam, you're also gifted in so many ways, but what do you feel is the importance of Browns Gas at this stage? And we're looking at the world of climate change. We see the problems of pollution. We know there's engineering techniques and strategies that do work, but where does Browns Gas come down in all of this?
Well, Browns Gas can be used, could be used in so many different ways for transportation. And we glazed bricks. We could put a glaze on brick face to make the brick impervious to acid rain, for example. So here's another example of this whole industry which could have been improved and still could be improved. This is a way you can take we designed this broad flamed torch which would have used a bigger unit, and we could just basically kind of paint a brick building with it, and there would be this crystal clear glaze put on it. And it was remarkable. The other thing that it was really good for, Browns Gas is really good for incinerator waste combustion, because it's such a high energy flame, and it consumes stuff so thoroughly that if you created incinerators around that, we did several experiments on a small scale with, like the biggest one was with a 4-foot tube.
What about PVCs or very toxic products from hospitals, et cetera, et cetera?
You could burn syringes with it and stuff like that. When you burn with this, you want to, if you really keep the flame on it, you want to have it be totally combusted. And it could do that. It could reduce stuff to a fine ash. There's supposedly an application of Browns Gas to purify radioactive materials. I never used it for that, so I don't have any personal experience with that. I know that he did that experiment several times, and many people who saw it were amazed. And I don't doubt it, because just basically everything we did was amazing.
So let's look at some of the patents going back to 1918 with Charles Fraser, with the oxygen generator. Then there was Charles Garnett in 1935, William Rose in 1966 and 67 with the multicellular oxyhydrogen generator, Yule Brown in 77, Stanley Miller in 1990, more recently Dennis Klein and R.M. Centelli in 2006.
Right, and now it's grown exponentially, so you have, we'll say, 2 patents in 2010, and these are US patents, not world patents, because those exist as well. And then you have 4 patents in 2011, a patent in 2012, patent in 2013, 2014, and it's really, as I said, exponentially growing in many areas, even that of health, actually.
So what can we say about the uniqueness of Brown's gas? The oxygen content doesn't come from outside air, but from the electrolysis of H2 and O2 water. Therefore, it is not explosive when handled properly, kept from the outside air. It is lighter than liquid propane gas. It is not, in all cases, lighter than air, however. It does not require pre-storage, usually because it is generally made on demand.
So what are the common uses? Well, you heard some of this, the welding and incineration. There's also applications in petrol cars where it's a 50-50 shot on this, mostly because those that are putting them in their cars are usually very homemade. I would even say in the garage or in the backyard. And so there's no consistency on this. But at $200 to $2,000, many people who have gotten them to work say that's really been beneficial for their cars. In diesel trucks, it's used, and these are all used just as additives. You keep the petrol car going, you keep the diesel truck going, but you add it to the system.
And also we found in clean carbon from cars and trucks. This has proved to be a boon in China and other countries.
So let's look at welding, of course, is the biggest success.
Yes, the gas can produce temperatures which fluctuate from 120 to 3,000 degrees plus Celsius, depending upon the material that the gas comes from. It's been reported to go as much as 5,000 degrees. In some instances, I've heard 6,000 degrees. So with that, the heat of the flame automatically adjusts to various welding situations of material. The cost is considered as 60% of acetylene gas, 40% of propane gas, and 30% of liquid propane. The Browns gas process cuts iron about 30% faster than other industrial gas because the oxidation effect is enhanced.
And it can vaporize tungsten steel. It will burn in a vacuum, but it won't boil water. So if you want to put that into your, how do you have gas that does that? Well, Best Korea was one of the first. Actually, they actually work with Yule Brown, and so they've done spin-offs from that.
Yes, they're pushing the envelope regarding welding, heaters, and new types of incinerators. They've got 10 patent certificates. They mix fossil fuel and bronze gas for incinerators, managing industrial waste, volatile organic compounds, and even removing various smelly situations.
They've used it for incinerators of asbestos, and they even have used it in Korea for crematoriums. So it's a little
check out
strange.
their websites.
Anyway.
Let's look at some of our work closer to home in Austria, where we have a research verein in Austria, and you see some of the units.
And we've coordinated with those who were doing this club of HHO in Austria. Here's Christoph, who's the manager of the club, and this is his unit that he brought to one of our gatherings to really show. It's just his demonstrated unit that he can carry in his car. He has bigger ones that are more difficult to get around. You can see it here. We're going to listen to Christoph. It's going to be in German and English, so those of you who understand German may appreciate it. It's very short, but it shows it running.
We're very happy to introduce Christoph from Austria.
Die Faszination, wenn wir diese Flamme hier sehen,
The fascination when you look at this flame that is produced
ist jene, ich kann das hier ganz kurz vielleicht gleich am Anfang zeigen, für die, die es interessiert.
I can show this to you for those of you who are interested. Perhaps you
Ja. Ich starte die Maschinerie.
So I'm starting
makes a
the
joke.
machine.
Hat jeder Gehörschutz mit dabei? Sturzhelm, Schutzbrille?
Everybody with their earplugs, with their glasses, helmet.
It doesn't do anything,
Das
really,
ist hier
except for-
Wasser, es ist etwas braun, weil es etwas Rost hat.
This is the water. This is only water. It is a bit brown because it's rusty.
Und das ist hier Wasser, das brennt.
And this is burning water.
Die Eigenschaft dieser Flamme ist so, dass sie eine Oberflächentemperatur hat, die sehr, sehr klein ist, nämlich ungefähr 140 Grad.
The surface temperature of this flame is very small. It's only about 140 degrees Celsius.
Also das ist noch nicht viel Energie.
This is not a lot of energy yet.
Wenn ich aber mit dieser Flamme auf einen Gegenstand treffe, wie zum Beispiel hier dieser Ziegelstein,
However, if I turn this flame onto an object like this brick,
ich mache das jetzt hier vorne dran,
I do it in the front so you can see it. Don't look into the
seht ihr, was da passiert?
see what is happening.
Der Ziegel wird sofort zu Glas.
The brick is vitrified immediately.
Das bedeutet, je nachdem, worauf ich mit dieser Flamme komme,
This means, depending on what material the flame touches or hits,
entwickelt sich eine ganz unterschiedliche Temperatur.
different surface temperature is developed.
Wir haben Spitzentemperaturen gemessen bis 5600 Grad.
We measured peak temperatures of 5,600 degrees.
Und das,
5,600.
und das immer mit derselben Energie, um das Gas produzieren.
Always with the same energy that produces a gas. Picture of where we do the test.
Mit diesem Wärmetauscher haben wir einen Lehmofen gebaut.
With this heat converter, we built
Kachelofen,
yeah, clay oven anyway.
ja, den wir mit ganz, ganz geringer Energie geheizt haben.
That we were able to heat with very, very little energy.
Das ist der Ofen,
This is the oven or
die Hülle.
the
Und um diesen Ofen zu heizen, braucht man eine Leistung von ca. 400 Watt.
and in order to heat this oven, you only need about 400 watts of.
Und du hast einen Raum mit 40 Quadratmeter wunderbar aufgeheizt.
And a room of 40 square meters is wonderfully warm.
Wir haben da dann weiter geforscht und gemacht und die größer gebaut und das war dann die erste vollautomatische Zelle.
So we continued in making models, and this is our first fully automatic fuel cell.
Now we produce about 5 liter gas in a minute.
Wir produzieren
Nearby.
hier etwa 5 Liter Gas pro Minute.
And wenn ihr etwas dunkel machen könnt, sieht man die Flamme besser.
If the lights could be turned down a little bit, you see the flame better.
Yeah. Woo.
Die Flamme ist also hier noch relativ gut spürbar
Here you can still feel the flame.
und speziell wenn wir wieder den Stein hernehmen oder das Glas draus machen,
And if you vitrify the,
mit dieser Flamme können wir Stein und Eisen gemeinsam verschmelzen.
you can melt or mend iron and rock with this flame.
Entwicklung hat auch viel mit Spaß zu tun.
Development and research is also a lot of fun.
So, there is a controversial use, of course, with anything new, HHO gas, as an additive in cars with 7 to 15% fuel savings. In the United States, a program called Mythbusters TV tried to show was not successful. A positive example was where the HHO as an additive to the gas is injected directly through a tight vacuum hose into the motor before the throttle plate. On a 2010 Kia Soul with a dry cell bought from the Hydrogen Club USA, system, of course, can be bought off Amazon, resulting in comparison original fuel equaling 27.7 miles per gallon, with HHO giving us 40 miles per gallon. This pays for itself in a 6 to 9 month period. Based on oil prices, one is saving about 13%. 1976 Pontiac Trans Am was tested, getting 10 miles per gallon, with HHO giving an average of 27 miles per gallon. Another test with Honda in 1995 Del Sol model was getting 27 miles per gallon. HHO was, however, giving us 39 miles per gallon.
So the good thing, though, is that for classic cars, it lowers the emission, because what it's really doing is causing the fuel to burn more completely while in the engine. So you can see this from our associates at Empire Hydrogen Fuel Enhancement System that was added to a 2001 Ford E350, which is a large passenger vehicle. with a 10-cylinder, 6.8-liter engine. This is their 2009 emission report, and you'll see if you look at the middle column there, the HHO vehicle reading is well below not only the maximum, but well below even the average passing reading. So for carbon monoxide, for example, which is allowed at 18, they were 0.05. They could have gone up as high as 4.6. So in terms of just an average car of that age. So it's really an incredible thing for keeping your cars on the road. And believe me, we have old cars and we always want to make sure we pass our emissions test, and this is a clear way to do it.
Even for truck fleets and car fleets. So how do we use HHO in cars, Desiree?
So a general rule of thumb is for production in cars is a 1/4 liter per minute for each liter of engine size. So 1 liter of water can make about 1,860 liters of HHO gas. The hotter the engine, the more production of HHO, and it can be put into the carburetor, into the air intake, or directly into the engine block. And people have tried all of these. Most of them all work depending on the configuration.
Let's look at the service required. You see, of course, the model at the top left. Every 1,000 kilometers, one will need 1 liter of water, and one adds a small amount of lye. For trucks, KOH should be added every 3 months. Every 6 months, depending on the amount of use, it is recommended to drain and flush the system and replace with fresh distilled water and electrolyte catalyst.
So Empire Hydrogen, we've connected with these people quite a bit, and they've been extremely successful. They're in the Vancouver, BC area, and what they can use it for petrol or for diesel, but they've looked at really, because to make money, the $202,000 isn't going to get you much if you're a real company. You need to put it into some real industrial scenario. So usually truck companies, or even as they did here, a rock crushing plant, and they put it into a John Deere PowerTech, a 12.5-liter system, and the owner of the company had great historical records of how much energy it was using. Normally it was an average of 78.74 liters of diesel fuel per hour, and with the Empire Hydrogen enhancement system, it went down to 63.78 liters per hour. So they're saving 19%, and that comes to about a 13.47 Canadian dollar per hour savings, or about $2,000 a week. And for our company, that's a great thing. This is the system itself. It's 75 pounds. It actually costs about $6,500. In a truck, it goes in the back, but it's 75 pounds is really nothing for a truck. 34 kilos for those of you.
Here we give an overview of some of the reports that have been presented.
And if you look at just the improvement column, and these are for various trucks that Empire Hydrogen has applied it to, you can see the average is about 20%, which is really critical and really good for saving money, according to the...
Particularly small intermediate business.
Right. They have to put it in, though. They won't let you put it into a truck. They have to put it in to make sure it works.
Sven Telstar, the chairman of the Empire board, said the typical long-haul trucker will spend between $10,000 and $15,000 a month on fuel, and if they can save only 10% in fuel costs, they are looking at paying the $6,500 for the Empire unit cost in about 6 months, making more money after that. That is to say, it's going to be a positive sliding scale. The Empire oxygen fuel enhancement system draws about 20 amperes from the vehicle's electrical system and requires less than 1/2 horsepower from the engine to generate. So we have a very clean, small, capable system.
Now, we wouldn't be really scientists if we didn't look at competitors. So here's another competitor in Canada called Dynasert, and they recently had tests done on a Class 8 trucks with their hydrogen units, and they took it all to a third party, to the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, which is really a very high-class testing place, and they came out with 550 pages of good data showing what this really does. But in summary, it shows, because they put it in trucks, mostly into the air intake, and then it goes through the system. So they got increased torque, they get improved engine oil quality. They also have put it into, as we'll see in a moment here, into Pepsi Cola trucks that drive around. That was their field trial on Detroit diesel Series 60 12.7 liter engines, and they got about a 15% fuel savings, and that's a lot.
So
Because
for the young engineers watching this program, they have over 550 pages of valuable data on the tests.
Right, and so these trucks went about 200,000 miles a year, and that was for the company about $3 million savings. What happens is actually 9 times the flame speed versus diesel alone. So you're really combusting everything right in the engine, so what comes out is a leaner burn, less fuel expense, obviously, and we're talking about very little carbon monoxides and nitric oxides.
So when we look at the dinosaur chart in terms of fuel economy on one side, and the baseline showing the time frequencies, you can see with the traditional non-hydrogen at the lower part of the chart, and then in the upper part, you'll see the hydrogen at work with a 10 to 20% increase.
So from usually 6 to 7 miles per gallon for Canada for trucks, they've gone from anywhere from over 7 to up to 9 miles per gallon by using the system. And in honor of our friends from Tokyo, I know some of you know Massa Gas. And
This is a wonderful scientist who has revolutionized in Japan fuel possibilities, what is called a Massa Gas.
he claims it's not really Browns gas, but it's very, very similar. He actually gets more bubbles. He hasn't made it really on demand in the car yet, but I believe he could do this. And
It's not to be considered, though, over unity.
yeah, exactly.
So it's a small stirring system that he has with micro bubbles. That's what we say, the generative process. So the question is, why only distilled water? Distilled water is basically pure water. Other types of water like tap water, mineral water, pond water, seawater, etc. will work here, but they will also quickly cause the electrolyte to become quote-unquote muddy due to the materials and impurities one finds in water.
So there's been many companies that have been successful other than what we've mentioned. There's also companies that have been not successful. Those are the ones that stand out on the internet, of course. But unfortunately, there's always a growth of new technology, like you have solar. I mean, there was a whole system of solar that collapsed in the U.S., and now everyone says bad to solar. I mean, that's ridiculous, one company. There's some great things going on, like OK Energy in China has not only done the welding, the diesel fuel supplements, but they also have decided this cleans out your car. So people can go to their service station, hook it up to these green machines there, and literally clear the carbon out of your
Particularly
engine.
in areas of massive pollution. So the common question is, will it rust or corrode your system? The answer, no. The fossil fuel, gas or diesel, produces enough heat during combustion to vaporize the hydrogen as it converts back to water and exits the exhaust system.
So let's talk about some controversial things. One of the main things which many of you have heard about is Stanley Miller, who decided to run his entire car on an HHO system. It's difficult to do because usually it's a lot of production, takes a lot of heat, really not as efficient. But Miller had a way. He claimed he could use radio waves to produce the electricity to break down the water. And he did this by a radio frequency that was about 42.8 kilohertz. Some people say it was less, it was 20. You know, there's controversy. Obviously, he's no longer with us.
And Keeley used a 43 kilohertz frequency.
So it's very interesting that frequency, as we've been talking about, it just had some lectures on sound, may be a way of also breaking down water into certain things. Now, implosion is another issue. We're going to go back now to Adam Tromley,
The physicist that we work with.
who was there talking about
So
with
listen carefully to
Brown.
this conversation. What do you really feel are the, we say, spin-offs of Brown's gas? I mean, there's so many things we know that they can be applied, they can be used. But in terms of prioritizing things that you see,
Well, it's a great transitional technology, number one, because we're all of a sudden in this great global crisis because oil is basically dead.
right?
Fascinating. And we were just finishing up my new lab, which was a kind of a large area. And we set up a specific, once we were ready to test the implosion principle, that so many people have said, even now on the internet, there are things saying it's total balderdash that you cannot have hydroxy gas implode. Well, in point of fact, we demonstrated I can't even remember, 189 times that year.
Magnificent relationships came out of that.
Oh, God. And chairmen of the boards of oil companies and engineering firms and stuff, I saw guys like that in tears because the implications of the experiment, of the demonstration were so great. And in point of fact, we did set up one of his units, we had a nice workbench, and we basically would take the gas from the blow. This is a welding system, and instead of putting welding equipment on it, we took the gas and displaced water in a stainless steel cylinder, like a liter of water, and we displaced that through a Viton. It's important, but through a clear plastic tube, so everybody could watch the water being pushed over to this lucite cylinder. And then there was a 10,000 volt spark plug that was really modified a la Tesla. But it was a very specific and interesting kind of spark plug. And we'd hit the switch, and it was just a snap, boom, a snap. And in an instant, the hydroxy gas would collapse. 1,853 units of volume of gas would collapse into 1 unit of water vapor. I mean, and so therefore that created a vacuum, and then air pressure on the other side went to work. So this thing that we never even think about went to work for us and pushed that water down back into the unit. And we had some very famous scientists come who literally, we had one guy from a very famous institute in Colorado who was sent by his boss, who still to this day says it's impossible. I won't mention his name right now. But anyway, he crawled around on his hands and knees for an hour and a half looking for the hidden vacuum pump. Because he was convinced it had to be there. Vehicles can be adapted and retrofitted is one way of looking at it. New vehicles could be created. We actually were postulating vehicles with ceramic engines that could be printed now. We weren't saying that back in 1986, but now you could actually print a hydroxy gas engine that would be able, because there's no, when the explosion, there's no explosion, there's an implosion, unless you carburate it, and then but we designed implosion-driven, engines. And so an implosion-driven engine with only water vapor and through the exhaust.
I'm thinking of this great Austrian.
Right. Well, Schauberger did discover this in the 1930s,
Yeah.
and he kept wondering what was happening. And he finally, being an observer, a keen observer of nature, he was observing these vortices appearing on the surface of lakes, and he was going, "What is driving that?" And he discovered there was this very interesting principle driving it, which is that in a water vortex, you can create a potential, an electric potential, where the hydroxy gas of the water itself momentarily dissociates, expands in volume, and then collapses again in the dynamic of the vortex. It's a remarkable phenomenon. And
In that moment
there's
of
so many
expansion,
things, yeah.
you can do wonders.
Yes, and in the moment of contraction, actually, it's when you, and in the Schauberger generator, when the gas imploded and he put the air pressure to work like we did in the demonstrations, then in point of fact, that becomes motive power. Again, it's not a cylinder pushing against air pressure anymore, it's a cylinder actually being helped by air pressure. So you have perfect combustion plus the added benefit of air pressure. Of course, this would be very beneficial all over the world. It's much easier for people to get their minds around this concept once they see it.
So in summary, as an additive, there are economic savings from 15 to 20%. HHL reduces fuel consumption by forcing carbon-based fuel to burn more completely and efficiently. Also helps to clean carbon deposits inside the engine. HHO burns faster and cleaner than gas or diesel within your engine. This makes your vehicle run smoother, longer, cooler, and more efficiently than ever before.
So just a few final points. Oxygen also does play a role in terms of the unburned hydrocarbons and also in the inhibiting the formation of nitrates. This is one of the main results from NASA from May 1977 that most people look to because they also had tried hydrogen in combination with petrol and got a great savings on the gasoline. What else is in the future? The main thing that I think is really exciting is that BMW is now looking seriously and implementing water injection engines. Obviously, it's a different technology, but still the idea that water can go through the engine. It's been around since the World War II in airplanes. It's been in race cars, but now BMW is coming out with cars that is claiming 8% savings in water, but actually they're really getting 15 to 20%. They just don't want to say it. And this is how, it's just water injection directly into the engine. Amazing technology. Water is definitely a clear way of moving forward with saving fuel.
Benefits, I guess, as Desiree has said, are increasing 20%. Big exhaust systems are being looked at more carefully, just like putting water into your car of a cleaning fluid. Also putting pure water into your body helps to neutralize radicals in your system. So also there are increasing benefits as you look at the whole spectrum of scientific technology.
And some strange scientists working with HHO are actually looking at it in terms of health and healing.
Well, we thank you with all respects to Schellberger and your son of Bulgaria, Yul Brown. We're at the United Nations. We work worldwide with theoretical physicists, chemical researchers, and futurists. And we thank once again Dr. Jerry for his wonderful leadership. And we would argue that HHO suggests a fifth state of matter. Easy matter, yes, is showing the way to a fifth state of matter. Thank you so much for your dedication, all of you.
Questions?
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Are there any questions?
No questions are good.
In the back.
In the back.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I wondered, did any of the applications that you have encountered provide over unity?
No, actually, and we're very specific on that. We really don't want to claim over unity. I mean, if you want to look at Stanley Miller, but I mean, he's already dead, and unless someone else wants to really test his system.
The critics of HHO try to connect this with over unity proof, but we're dealing with something that is not in that range. This is well within the areas of what most labs are testing, and we would argue against extravagant claims. So we're looking at applications for truck fleets, for car fleets, and for modern industrial centers that need savings. In the back, yes, Charles.
If you want to understand how to do over unity without violating physical laws, you just need to look to the Archimedean lever of phase change. So you can take hydrogen, inject it into a cylinder or a rotary engine, and add atomized water vapor. The flash point of the hydrogen is hot enough to convert that water vapor to steam, thereby creating an Archimedean lever effect where you're getting over unity without violating physical law.
Charles, you're one of our new members and colleagues, and those of you in the audience who want to look at the medical applications also in a new form of drinking water, look to Charles.
And Charles says his friend actually owns the Stanley Miller car, right? So
Yes.
in a museum.
So there are many applications we haven't touched upon in the medical field. Needless to say, this is the genius of our friend Yul Brown looking into the future across the spectrum. Thank you so much, ad astra, as the Greeks would
Was
say.
there a final question?
Okay.
To the stars.
I saw a hand down. Yeah, final question.
Yes, I've experimented with that a little bit myself and ran some cars on some water, gasoline. I was able to use about 80% water to 20% gasoline for the internal combustion. And I found exactly what you found, is that you need to bring something up to temperature so the hydrogen then burns, which then burns the oxygen, then reconverts it back to water again. So you aren't violating any physics laws, and you get the increase in the mileage because you're actually using less gasoline to water or water ratio. you use the same bulk amount, but you derive the energy from the water instead of the gasoline. So you're not violating any physics laws whatsoever.
Right.
Right. Thank you for the support.
Thank you for the
All the
nice
people who are
overview.
interested.
Again, we also want to salute Professor Winter in Germany, who years ago allowed me to be one of his test patients in the Mercedes car running on oxyhydrates, and we discussed the future of oxyhydrogen, and we're now in the future. So this is really the most fantastic time to live with a renaissance in the energy field taking place. It's clean, inexpensive, and available through the internet so people can build their own units and apply them. We thank you once again.